The war is definitely not over. There's still a lot more negotiations that need to take place.
Welcome. The signing ceremony hasn't happened, but is the war over? Is that why the price of Brent crude is plunging?
The war is not over. This is obviously a good development in a de-escalatory trajectory for the war, but the war is definitely not over. There's still a lot more negotiations that need to take place. And this is just a ceasefire that will come before a longer peace process. And the more sticky questions around Iran's nuclear program and the future of the Strait of Hormuz is just beginning to be negotiated now. So there's still a lot more to go.
The US has been criticised for ending up with a deal that is worse than what was there before the first shots were fired. Is that your view?
Well, the United States has clearly made a series of concessions in the Memorandum of Understanding. We don't know, obviously, what's fully in it, but based on what has been put out in the public, it is clear that the United States has walked back a few of its red lines and has made a number of concessions to Iran to get it over the line. And this reflects the fact that the dynamics of the conflict were not favouring the United States. The Iranians were able to restrict and more or less close the Strait of Hormuz with little effort, it seems. Drone and missile technology means they didn't need to rely on things like mines or a navy in order to do this. And we also know that their ballistic missile program has been very robust. It appears that they've maintained a great deal of the stockpiles of their missiles, and they have been used very effectively throughout the Gulf and in Israel. And this means that a military solution for the United States remained evasive, and that's the reason why they had to come to the negotiating table and ultimately offer up concessions. And we had long said that this war would only really start to wind down once the United States realized that the only way to progress with the peace negotiations was to make concessions.
Well, Iran does know, as does the world, that it can close shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. So even with the ceasefire, is the Middle East in a more fragile position now than it was before the US and Israel began?
Yes, I mean, I think the entire security architecture of the Middle East will have to be renegotiated at this stage. There has been extensive damage done to military bases, US military bases throughout the Gulf. They will have to be rebuilt. That will need to be paid for. So who pays for this? Do we actually want a military base here at all? These sorts of questions will start to come up. I think you'll see particularly the Gulf states start to not move away from the United States necessarily, but start to hedge a little bit more, try to think about what are the other security partners they can bring in, other security partners they can work with, while still trying to retain access, should I say, to US equipment. So they still want to buy the good equipment from the United States. They want to have good relationships with the United States. But in this conflict, having US bases did not protect them from being bombed. So they're going to start thinking about what other options are available to them.
Is the oil shock over?
The oil shock is not over. We first need to wait and see how the opening of the Strait progresses, how quickly traffic can get through. We also don't know how insurance is going to work out, and whether or not ships will be able to get the insurance they need to go back, and whether or not they'll want to go back at all. So all of these questions need to be answered. We also don't know the full extent of the damage done to infrastructure in the region. So there's still a lot of unknowns about how quickly that supply can come back on.
The chair of the banking regulator, APRA, John Lonsdale, and the RBA's Brad Jones today warned that the current geopolitical environment is such that finance and technology are becoming the epicentre of grey zone activity. Are the Australian financial system and Australian businesses now finding themselves in what Brad Jones calls an alternative battle space?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that countries are using a greater variety of tactics, and this comes from two sources. The first is a position of strength, and we see the United States use this in financial markets, for example, quite extensively, and in technology, where they retain a very favourable position. And this is an alternative to other forms of coercion, and they're making more use of this. And other countries are starting to do that more. We see that from China, for example, with rare earth minerals. The other aspect is this more asymmetric aspect, and that's what we've seen play out in Iran. And we might start to think of what are the other ways that countries can, from a weaker position, leverage what they have in order to exert some type of economic coercion. So we need to broaden our understanding of what security is, what economic security is, and understand that economic interconnectedness is in creating avenues for weaponization as well.
What do Australian businesses and board directors need to be cognizant of in this environment?
I think we just need to be thinking a bit more critically about where vulnerabilities may lie, and things that we took for granted would always be there or would be secure are becoming more dubious, right? So the global economy has run off a series of standards and norms that things just kind of run this way, and that will always kind of be the case. That is what's changing. So things that we used to take for granted need to be reassessed, and things that we thought may not be sources of vulnerability may become sources of vulnerability, and we need to interrogate more holistically what our supply chains look like and where those vulnerabilities may be.
And is Australia, as a country, moving fast enough to address the challenge?
Well, the Australian government has prioritised a number of areas in this space, but the important thing is that this ultimately needs to be paid for in some way, and that will always be a political question, right? So if we want to move away from Chinese supply chains for critical minerals and rare earths, for example, there's a lot of opportunity for Australia in that space, but we're not really going to be able to compete with China on price here. So someone needs to pay, and who's that going to be? And those sorts of questions are what are inhibiting some of the progress in these areas, and that will continue to come up, not just in critical minerals, but a whole host of other areas as well.
Madison Cartwright, thank you.
Thank you.